Hi everyone, this is part 1 of all the SAT grammar rules, which will cover all 20 of them over the course of 4 videos. So the first grammar rule is regarding period and semicolons. So on both the SAT and the ACT, these two types of punctuations will be identical, so you'll never be asked to choose between them. So both of them are used between two complete sentences. So, for example, the sun had already set, the sky was painted with stars. You could put a period, or you could say the sun had already set, semicolon, the sky was painted with stars. It can also be used between conjunctive adverbs, which is words like however, therefore, moreover, which connects two sentences. Example, I was tired, semicolon, however, I stayed up to finish the project, or you could put a period. Another one is he didn't study much, semicolon, period, therefore, he didn't do well on the test. The second SAT grammar rule is on colons and dashes. So these are used to introduce lists or explanations, so like additional information. And then like the semicolon and the period, they are the same thing, equal on the SAT and ACT, and you will not be asked to choose between them. So unlike the semicolon, a colon or dash can be followed by either a full sentence or a fragment, but it has to be like the semicolon, it has to start with a full sentence. So you can have a full sentence, colon or dash, and then you can either have a fragment or a full sentence. And you have to make sure that the first part can logically stand alone. Like, if you just remove the part after the em dash, it still makes sense as a full sentence. So, an example of that would be, an incorrect example would be, she brought everything she needed for the trip, such as em dash or colon, a sunscreen, a hat, and sandals. So here, if you just ignore the part after the colon or dash, you see she brought everything she needed for the trip, such as. Right here, logically, it's not a complete sentence. So something that would work would, she packed 3 essentials for the trip, colon or em dash, sunscreen, a hat, and sandals. So here, she packed 3 essentials for the trip. You can put a period, that's a complete sentence. So the second application is before an explanation. So an example would be, he was faced with only one option, you put the colon, apologize and hope for forgiveness. So right here, you can see that the first part is he was faced with only one option. That's a complete sentence. And then, so then it works right here correctly. But let's say it was, he was faced with only options which were, that wouldn't work because the which were makes it an incomplete sentence. Grammar rule is the comma and fanboys. So whenever you have a comma and then followed by fanboys, which is a subordinating conjunction, which is for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So whenever you have those, it's the equivalent of a period or semicolon. So for example, if you have London is a very old city, comma, but some parts of it are extremely modern. You have a period, you have a comma followed by but, which is one of the fanboys. So that's the equivalent of period, which you can see, you could say, London is a very old city. Some parts of it are extremely modern. So the second thing is on commas. Commas cannot join two complete sentences. And that's, when you do that, it's known as a comma splice, and that is always incorrect. So an example would be, London is a very old city, comma, it has some extremely modern parts. So right here, it says London is a very old city. That's a sentence. It has some extremely modern parts. That's another sentence. So they can't be together. They can't be joined by a comma, because that would be a comma splice. So you would have to put a period or a semicolon, or you could add a fanboys, which would also be equivalent to a period and a semicolon. The final rule about commas and fanboys is that when two clauses in a row have the same subject. So the first part is talking about London, let's say, and then the second part is talking about London, and the subject does not appear in the second clause, so London is not stated in the second part. No comma is used before a fanboys conjunction, and that is the comma and fanboys. So, like, for example, London is a very old city, but has many modern buildings. So what you might want to put a comma between city and but. So London is a very old city, comma, but has many modern buildings. But that would be incorrect because you have both clauses are talking about London, and because you have a common fanboys and then a verb, it's wrong. So that's a way to remember it. If you have common fanboys, so one of the fanboys in a comma, and then it's followed by a verb, like has, something like that, that is wrong, incorrect. Fourth SAT grammar rule is about commas and dependent clauses. So like guys know, dependent clause is a fragment, which is basically a sentence that can't stand on its own. So when that dependent clause starts with a subordinating conjunction, And a subordinate conjunction is basically a word that will relate an independent and a dependent conjunction, independent and dependent clause. So something like although, because, since, before, after. That's a subordinating conjunction. So if the dependent clause with the subordinating conjunction is before the independent, you will have to put a comma between the dependent and the independent. For example, since it was raining, we canceled the picnic. So since it was raining is the dependent clause, and it cannot stand alone. Since it was raining is not a complete sentence, and the subordinate conjunction is since. So because that comes before the dependent clause, we canceled the picnic. You have to put a comma. If you don't put a comma, that's incorrect. Another example would be, although she was nervous, she gave a great speech. So although she was nervous is the dependent clause with the subordinate conjunction, which is although. So although she was nervous can't stand alone, and so you need to put a comma between them. So the fifth grammar rule is transitional words and phrases. So it's not necessarily a grammar rule, but on the SAT, especially, it's also on the ACT, but especially the SAT, it will test transitional words and phrases in terms of their meaning, not in grammar. So in these cases, like, every single sentence will be grammatically correct, but the correct choice is the one with the most logical transition word. So transition word is something like moreover, therefore, however, something like that. So you need to know the three main types of transitions. So sometimes it's logical, but it's still good to know like why it's correct. So the first type is a continuer, which is like in addition, moreover, for example, then. These add new or similar ideas, emphasize previous ideas. So basically, it just like talks about it, just carries on with more information about the previous, what was said previously. And then there's cause and effect words. So like therefore, consequently, thus. So like this clause caused the next clause. And then there's a contradictor, which is like however, nevertheless, in contrast, which is like opposing ideas. This thing happened, but, or however, something opposing happened. So something you can do, because it's going to be one of the three, continuer, cause and effect words, or contradictors. So if one of the answer options, if two of the answer options have the same one, so like two of them have a continuer, you can cross both of them out. So for this grammar rule, I'm going to get an example from the SAT question bank, which is a good source if you guys ever need practice problems for any math or reading and writing. So the question says, the Babylonian king Hammurabi achieved much during his 40-year reign. He conquered all of Mesopotamia and built Babylon into one of the most powerful cities of the ancient world. Today, blank, he is mainly remembered for a code of laws inscribed on a 7-foot tall block of stone, the Code of Hammurabi. So the question asks, which choice completes the text in the most logical transition? A, therefore, B, likewise, C, however, and D, for instance. So basically for this one we can see that before the comma, it is talking about how he conquered Mesopotamia and built Babylon. After it, it's talking about how he's remembered for his Code of Hammurabi. So that shows like it's like opposing. Right here it says one of his biggest achievement was building Babylon. Right here it says he's remembered for his Code of Hammurabi. So that's why you would say that the correct answer would be however, because it shows but yeah, like the difference between them. Therefore, wouldn't make sense because it's like adding, like continuing a line of logic